So we've shared, okay? So now, you've had a chance to look, get your hands into those papers. What is your broad topic area? Why are you interested in something? And I'm glad to, that you were able to sort of say, okay, this is written about foreign teachers in America, but what does it say to me? How can I take these ideas and work with them? What do I want to know about my topic? What is it that I want to know? Do I want to know theories, or do I want to know more about research that's been done? Am I interested in their findings? Okay, so and how will it improve my students' learning? So if you've got disruptive students in your class, that means that some of the other students can't learn as well as that student. So that's what's important, isn't it? It's not the disruptive student, it's the learning of other students in the classroom. And then what can you as a teacher learn from doing this research? And you can see what other teachers have learned from doing their research. So that is about choosing a topic. Now, and then analyzing the results, and that's what I wanted you to tell me about the findings, because the method is going to determine what you're going to find. So you have to ask the right questions. You have to find the right data. Sometimes I did a research project and I realized I collected all this data, but it wasn't my question. So why am I doing this? Why am I collecting? It's not going to answer my question. So you have to understand what your question is. And remember what our teacher's question were on the others, about why do some of my students participate and why some of them don't. Those were the questions, okay? So, so what is your question and what data do you have that can answer that question? So you need to keep in mind the question that you're answering when you go to collect your data. And that's why there's a different methodology. So you can have a qualitative data collection, and that is a lot of the things that we have seen in some of these papers, things like discourse analysis. We're looking at 1 or 2 or at most 10 students here, okay? We're looking at, this was a qualitative study when we saw the counting of the students, so we're using numbers, but that was not a quantitative study. A quantitative study is statistical analysis, okay, where you get your 2K and 3K. What do you think about it? I am a total qualitative, but we can use these as descriptive statistics. Descriptive statistics. So, yeah, okay. So I said, how many boys are there and how many girls are there? How many questions were asked? So you were using numbers, weren't you? And I said, how many questions did girls answer? They answered 2.1 per, an average of 2.1 per student. That's not a quantitative, okay? Even though you're using numbers, it's a descriptive statistics, okay? So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of numbers at all. You can all do percentages, can't you? Can't you? You're teachers, of course you can use percentages. So you've got these students, and how many of them answered this, and how many of them answered that. Those percentages are, but they can tell you a lot of information, can't they? Okay? So, so the qualitative and the quantitative you probably won't be getting into, okay? And if you don't do numbers like me, don't come aside. So descriptive statistics, percentages of this, or average number of that, or where people lie on the Likert scale, and text analysis, okay? So those are the kinds of things that we can do to analyze our results. All right, so remember I had a 10-minute paper. So remember the first 5-minute paper was a very, 15 out of 19 students said that they liked the audio feedback, okay? So I said, okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. Now I'm going to go again, and I'm going to ask them again. I'm going to make it twice as long, so maybe I can get some more information, and I'm going to get some text. They're going to answer the question of why. So this was another group of a different group of students. So we have audio. So how many do we have here? We have 13 students here. So the audio is not quite as popular this time, unless you want to count both. Now, if I ask you one or the other and you answer both, what is that?
I have no preference. No, actually it means you have no preference.
So they said it depends. Okay, it depends. But we still have twice as many people like audio as written. So it's still a very, very popular thing. And 3 students said both, so maybe you want to listen to those. So why do you prefer audio? Why do you prefer it? So now we're getting into some more interesting things. It builds bridges, it connects, it can tell the teacher's moods. Oh, I was the teacher, you see, so I thought, oh, I hope I was in a good mood. I hope they liked my mood. They said thorough and more detailed. That's very important. So that's 6 here. 6 out of our 13 said it was, thorough and more detailed. More specific. Questions help me think and brainstorm. Easier to understand than the written. Easier to understand than the written. Maybe they can't read my handwriting. Or maybe, think of it this way, and that's another thing that I did. My question was, which do they like and why? But what I did that got me off track was I started counting how many words I spoke and how many words I wrote down. And I found that I was speaking 25 times as many words. What was this? Not answering my question. It's very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff. And then I started dividing them into positive feedback and negative feedback, further questions. I just had a wonderful time analyzing but it was not answering my question. Okay? So this is answering my question, is why they liked it. So I have some more. So that's why you prefer audio. Why do you prefer written? And remember, we have quite a few. Directly targets the errors. They can see right here. Okay? I'm a visual learner. I want to see it. Okay? I can see it clearly. And then why I don't like audio? It was too difficult to locate specific information. So as they were listening, they said, I can't find that specific information. And then I had another question. How did you read the audio files? This was very interesting because everybody listened to it more than once. Everybody listened to it more than once. And then I asked them, and then I asked people, I said, did you read your feedback more than once? No, I just read it once. Aha, they're going to listen to that audio feedback. It's worth my while to make those audio files because they're going to listen to it more times. So 2 times, 4 of them, 3 times, 4 of them, and 4 times 1 of them. And did you take notes? 11 of those 13 took notes on what they were listening. How many students, you've got an essay, you make your marks on the essay, you give them a grade, you give it back to them. Number 1, how many times do they read it? Okay. Do they take notes on your notes? No. But look how many took notes on the audio file. Taking notes is a very active thing, isn't it? Very, very active thing. So I'm sort of saying, whoa, this is interesting. 2 of them did not take notes. Okay, they just listened. But they listened more than once. Okay. 3 of them transcribed the data exactly. 5 minutes worth of Professor Wachob talking, and they transcribed it exactly. I said, well, that's overkill here. Listened first and then took notes. There were 8, so they listened to it, and then the second or third time, and remember some of them did 4 times. They took notes, listened and took notes at the same time. So they were not only listening, but they were taking notes as well. And how much more engaging that was, even if they didn't like it. Even if they didn't like it, even if they preferred the written, they still listened and they still took notes. So this is, now we're getting into something more than I like this or I like that, is why they did. Okay? Did the audio or the written help in rewriting? 11 of them said audio helped, 2 of them said it didn't, and 5 of them said the written helped. Because then I gave them the written as well. Okay? So, my question. My question was, which did they prefer? And how did they read the files? And so I'm getting a lot more information. Now this was the second time that I tried the audio file. It was the second time that I asked for information from the students. So I did my research twice, okay, 2 times. And maybe I should do it again. However, at this point, I said, my students like it, they're engaged in it, I'm going to keep doing it, okay? So when I have long papers especially, I still do audio files. You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question related to this same research. Did you feel any improvement? Did you compare students' work, for example, like
from one semester to the next?
No, not from one semester to the next.
One job.
The students
yeah.
Did you ever compare? Did you ever compare your written feedback students and your audio feedback students' work to each other?
Well,
everybody have they actually, was the improvement really greater when you gave them audio?
And I'll tell you, I've got 2 answers to that question. One of them was they had 2 assignments. They were about the same length. They were both short assignments. And so one of them was audio feedback and one of them was written feedback. So here I am saying, oh yeah, I've got 2 things I can compare. However, when I got to the end, I realized that it was comparing apples and oranges. And the reason why was one of those assignments was a proposal for the final paper. And so it had more in it. The other one was just a reflection. It was just a reflection. So one of them was a different kind of writing, and it needed more. And that was the one I gave the audio feedback on. So I gave a lot more information. So as a matter of fact, no, I did not answer that question. And that's the reason why, because it was apples and oranges.
It would be very interesting actually to see, I mean, the rewritten, if you have a control group and another group, that you give one written for and one audio and just compare.
Listen, even in your same class, if you have 2 assignments that are almost exactly the same, mine are the same length, but 2 very different
Very different.
And so it didn't work out.
Yeah.
But that's why you can get together with a friend, especially if you're teaching the same section, you're teaching the same group of kind of student, and 2 of you get together and say, okay, I'm going to give audio on this one, and written on this one, and you swap them around and give written on this one, and audio on that one, and see if the audio feedback does help them do a better
improve.
job. Do you see how that could work?
Yeah.
You have to give 2 of them, okay? You have to give audio and written so they can compare. But if you have students should get better from the semester, right? It should get better.
Oh, anyway.
So it's really hard. But anyway. So, but the students said that the audio helped. Okay, the students said that the audio helped them. So I'm working on that's good enough for me. But the students said that, so I don't know if we did or not. Okay, and what they said was that the audio was detailed, it was easy to rewrite. They brainstormed because of the questions. The comments were clear because they were more detailed. They were more compelling and motivating. And the students loved for me because I talked to them by name. I used their names and I talked to them about their projects that they were doing. And it was very, very personal. Very, very personal. I really liked it. And it was, of course, more comprehensive. In 5 minutes, at 170 words per minute, you can imagine how many words I was able to give them. Whereas how many comments can you write in 5 minutes? So it was a very interesting sort of thing. So audio did not help them. It was inconvenient to re-listen. Written helped because I needed to see the teacher's notes, and both because of the integration of the audio and written, it was a good idea. And someone said any kind of feedback helps. Okay. So, here I have some, and I'll give you this, I'll send this to you. Okay, so you can, here are some references for audio feedback and what other people have done. I haven't still written mine out yet. Okay. So, the last few minutes here, I'm gonna give you some ideas about how to write a questionnaire, okay? And how to do an observation. So, you've all seen these kinds of things, haven't you? What's your name and your age and your gender, your sex, your years of experience teaching, your education, your multiple intelligence or learning style. Why am I asking these questions? It's the first thing on a questionnaire, isn't it?
It depends on your analysis, probably.
So, here's name. We talked about name before.
You don't ask for the name.
Why are you asking their name?
Gender bias.
Okay, well,
no,
you know,
shouldn't
listen, if you ask someone twice, let's say you've got 2 different questionnaires, if you ask their name, then you can compare that person's before and after.
If you need that kind of information.
There's another way of doing it, which is to give everyone in the class a number. And on the back side of it, you put in pencil the number. They'll never see it. And then the next time, you hand out that paper with the same penciled number on the back side to the same student. Let's say you've got 20 students in the class, you know them well enough so that you can just hand out that. So that's one way you can get something from them where you can compare. You might, if you don't make it quite exact, then you're in trouble, aren't you? But yeah.
Just can I make a comment, because one of the mistakes most of us fall into is like gathering so much information. Some information is nice to know, but it's not really important. So I think when we're writing questionnaires, we need to be very focused on what is important for us to know, rather than what we can gather.
Age. Is that going to be important?
It depends.
Do you know how old they are? Yeah. Okay. If age is roughly, and is it important? How important? They're not 12 years old. You're not going to teach 12-year-olds. No. Okay. Are there any 40-year-old students in your classes? No. Okay. So maybe you don't need that information. You already know your students. Okay. This is not. Remember, we're not doing statistical analysis. So it's really not important. You know who your students are. So maybe we don't need their name. Okay, maybe we don't. Maybe we don't need. What about their gender, their sex?
It depends.
Thank you. It depends. It depends. And I just had a student. She did her master's thesis, and she had 9 students that she was videotaping. It was a small group in a couple of different classes, and there was only 1 male. Guess what? Gender was not a factor. It just, you know, and he was a quiet male as well. And so it really, you know, he was not dominating the conversation because he was shy. It didn't, okay? So you have to think about that. And things like nationality. When might nationality be a difference? Right, if you had a multicultural class.
Very different types of learners.
Yeah, from different countries. Let's say it's in a...
If you're looking at pronunciation, for example, maybe. What is the mother tongue?
Right,
compare
right. So maybe nationality, maybe mother tongue is important, or maybe nationality is. Nationality, if they're Arabic speakers, might make a difference, mightn't it? Because the different varieties of Arabic, and that might make a difference to them.
From the paper I was reading, apparently nationality differs in behavior laws.
Yes, yes, yes.
What is acceptable in one nationality?
Listen, I came here from Singapore. And my Singaporean students, we did not have any discipline problems in Singaporean students. One of my students in 4 years, one student, I said, get together, put your desks together in a group, and he did not do so. He kind of sat there with his arms crossed like this, and I went, he said, I'm moving. That was one discipline problem in 4 years. That was it. That was it. And I taught undergraduates.
Do they need teachers there?
So, you know, and you get here, and that's all you have is, you know, discipline problems. So and it is, you know, so so nationality could be, but if you were doing it on your students, are you going to ask them their nationality?
They're all teaching.
There's a lot. You don't bother to ask them their nationalities. Years experience, let's just say not teaching, but years experience, what? Years studying English, maybe? Years studying English in different kinds of schools, maybe that is something that's important to you. I've had some students say when a student was doing listening comprehension, and you know, she was interested. What kind of school did you go to? Did you ever hear any English spoken in your classes? They might have had English class, but nobody spoke English, and certainly not the students. Okay, they might have had those tapes from some book, and that was it. But and other students, you go to a school where they have native speakers, don't speak Arabic. Well, you get lots of English in English class. So those kinds of things might be important. Okay, background, experience doing something. Okay, years of study, if that's important, but maybe not. Education, here's a degree, what you want. Multiple intelligence or learning style. What's your multiple intelligence? What's your learning style? Yeah.
I have no idea.
Why not? Okay. Why are you asking a question like that? That might be really interesting to know, but you can't ask a question that the students cannot answer. Interesting question. Very good if you're going to try, but you have to ask questions that your participants can answer. Okay? So if that's important, then you better have a lesson on multiple intelligences, and then you can ask that question. Okay? So this is just a very, very brief thing about how to write a questionnaire or to ask what kinds of questions you want to ask. What are your variables? What is it that's important to you? Okay, here's a couple of things about question types. So now remember, mine was a very simple, kind of a free form. It was a 5-minute paper, okay? And I just asked those simple questions. Keep them simple. The simpler, the better, okay? But you also might have things. So this is an example. I like answering surveys. And this is a Likert scale. And this is the scale from 1, which is dislike, to enjoy very much, which is 5. And you get to, you've done this, haven't you? You've never done this. You circle, you know, here, and this is neutral. And this is like very much, and this is sort of, yeah, I like it, but not a lot, okay? So you know that scale. These are really fun, as long as the students don't do 3.
Everybody do that.
Yeah, okay. But if you can, the other thing is to make it a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, from 1 to 4, okay? But then you can get an idea of whether someone likes it or doesn't like it, if they do it often or they rarely do it. Do you see what I mean? You can use this as a way of gaining a lot of information very quickly on your students. And then when you analyze it, you can say, well, you know, the average for the class was 1.5. So some of them might have had up here at 5, but most of them hated it. Okay? So that's what I can tell you. So that's one kind of question. All right? Here's another one. I feel confident that I know how to construct a questionnaire, how to analyze a questionnaire, the pros and cons of when you use a questionnaire. None of the above. Okay? So this is, and one good thing about this is then you have how many do this, this, and this. Okay? In this case, you must make sure, what about, oh, this is circle all the replies so that you could do this, or you could choose one. The problem with that is that you have to have, if you have 4 choices, and someone says, well, I don't fit any of those, then you're in trouble. Then you have to put other with a space for them to fill it in. Okay? So these are the kinds of ways of constructing it. Here's another one, a way of constructing. Rank the importance to you of the following data collection methods. Okay? And this is, by the way, this is a really good slide because we have a whole list of qualitative. Okay? Questionnaire surveys. Closed surveys, which means just answer these questions. Open-ended questions are ones that very often will say, well, choose one on the Likert scale, or 1, 2, 3, 4, and then tell me why. Give me any other things. So that's an open-ended question. Gives you a lot of very interesting ideas, not just numbers that you can look at, okay? Diaries or journals. This could either be students doing diaries, and I had, when I did my doctoral research, I asked my students, my participants, to keep a journal for me, and there's some really wonderful things that they told me about it. You kept a journal, didn't you, Tasneem? Yeah. So these are journals that, so what happened today in class? Who said what happened? And it's pretty fresh in your mind if you do it that day, and you could just put a date on it and tell me all the good dirt, okay? So this could be either the students or the teachers, okay? Think aloud protocols. These are very interesting. I've never actually done it. But what you do is you get the students to do something, and this is usually a one-on-one. And you set the student down and you say, how did you analyze this problem? What did you do? And if you can imagine my students listening to the audio files, I'll sit down and I say, okay, you're listening to this audio file. What are you doing? And then as they are doing it, they tell you what they are doing and why. So it's thinking aloud, and it's telling them. So it gives you some ideas about the thought processes, what's going on in the little pea brains, okay? And it's very, very interesting. Give you very, very good data because it's done at the same time, okay? Interviews are those things where it's usually one-on-one. You can get someone else to help you have questions. Discourse analysis, we had some of this where you copy it down and you look at who's taking the turns and who's saying what and what kind of language are they using, very positive language, very negative language, whether they're using very soft language or they're being very direct, okay? Observations, okay? And remember we saw observation in the first one, we saw the analysis, so that's an observation. And there are, you have one, don't you? No. Yeah, oh, that's great, isn't it? Different kinds of observations for different kinds of things, okay? You can do something like, you want to know who's paying attention and who doesn't. So you get in the back of the classroom or on the side where you can see all of your students, and you just have a little grid with all their names, and every 5 minutes you go through paying attention, not paying attention, half paying attention, playing with their phone. Every 5 minutes you go through. And if you have an hour, you have, what's that, 12 observations for every single student about whether they were paying attention or not paying attention. Okay? So these things can be very, very, a lot of facts. A lot of facts, okay? So observation, and we talked about focus groups. Where I've done this before, where I get students together, what do you think of that? And they can all, and I'll put a question out there, a specific question that they have to answer. And so they can kind of brainstorm while they're doing it. And then after 3 or 4 minutes of discussing that, they say, well, most of us think this way, but some of us think the other way. Did you ever do my focus groups? Yeah. Ethnographies or case studies. Maybe you have one student, and you want to really focus on that student because that's a real problem student or a very successful student or something. And what you can do is you can do a journal, you can talk to that student, you can observe that student, and then you can write it up as a case study. And the case study is looking at one person or a very, very small group of students. Okay? So that's another thing you can do for an ethnography. Okay, so that's what kinds of interviews and the question types when you do interviews. If you're going to interview somebody, don't ask yes or no questions. Ask the who, what, when, why, where, how questions. Okay, the WH questions. so that you can get students or your interviewee to talk. We just talked about question types, the wording of your questions. Okay. Where do you conduct your interviews? You're a teacher. Call a student into your office. Power. Who's got power? Who gives grades? I do. So when you talk to a student, say, do you like this? Do you like that? Yes, teacher. Okay? So you have to be very, very careful about interviews and you know, maybe you need someone else to do those interviews, a different person. Okay? So interviews have their power relationships. Why are they saying this? Who's telling the truth and who isn't? Those anonymous questionnaires might get you more truthfulness, although not as much depth. Observations, and I would point to, could you hold that up? I think there are at least 2 copies of that, okay? These are observation schedules, things that you can look at, depending upon what you're interested in. Recording, audio and video. Questions?
I have 3 questions.
Okay.
The first question is something that I'm proposing that maybe we can work on next time, is how to transform the questions that come up as a result of wanting to answer to a problem in my classroom, how I transform this into a research question. I'm hoping that we can work on this, practical kind of work next time. The second thing is, you mentioned at the very beginning that action research is usually some kind of small-scale study. So actually, I want to ask if this is expandable. Can we expand this to a big-scale study? Can we expand this to the level of an MA research? This is one question. The last question is, how can I work on transforming my action research into some kind of research, full-fledged research study that would be published? How can I get published? How can I get my action research published?
Okay, so the first question was about how you transform your question into then a plan of action. So maybe we can work on that right now. What is your question? What are you interested
What's your problem?
What's your problem? What's your problem?
One of my problems, for example, is in content-based courses. In our final exams in the department, we assess language. So this should be one of the intended learning outcomes. So how can I focus, or how can I give weight to language skills in my classroom while not, marginalizing the content itself?
So do you teach? Language, for example, grammar, word choice, vocabulary? Do you teach that in your classroom?
Well, yeah, but I'm also teaching something like phonetics. Okay, so and I have very weak students, and maybe literature courses where when we assess them at the end, we have language in our background. We have the grammar, we have the spelling, we have all.
And that gets graded.
Exactly. With a big problem.
So what you want to do really is you want to make sure they get it, that they're taught that. If you want it explicit or implicit, it's okay either way.
It's okay as long as it achieves my objective.
Well, first of all, you might try asking your students if they feel their grammar is good enough, or they feel their language skills are good enough, and see and then ask them, well, if your language skills aren't good enough, what is it? Specific kinds of things, and then give them a range of things that they might want to study. Because some students know my verb tenses. I just don't do verb tenses. Or I don't understand, countables and uncountables. Or I don't understand when I'm supposed to use an article. Or they might be able to tell you that. How old are these students? How old are they? They might be able to tell you. You might try a focus group. And ask them, what is it that you need
We might try to set up a plan for an actual research. And
so when is the point where I turn this question or I turn this problem into a research question? Or a research study?
Okay, well, and you asked about, for example, an MA study or something beyond. The classroom-based action research can be just simple sorts of things like asking the students, doing a focus group. Your broad question is, we are assessing you on grammar at the end, or we're counting that as part of your grade. Are you getting enough? Are you succeeding? And you may know they're not, but you need to have them buy into it too. Because what if you started having explicit grammar lessons every day? 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Today we're going to take a grammar point, teach grammar. And they're saying, wait, we're doing content. Why are you teaching us grammar? You see? So you might get them to kind of buy into it. So you might do things like ask them, okay, in a broad general way, and get some information first, and then maybe you can make that into much more pointed question or questions. I think that I've just done this semester. I did 5 MA theses, and a number of them came from small-scale research like this. So one of the students was very, very interested in that whole concept of space and how furniture arrangement can make students work better. So her study started off in the gender class with it was called a Gender Space Identity and Power. And it was a critical pedagogy class, but I encouraged the students to do some short research. So what she did was she got permission from the administration of her school to use the teacher's meeting room to put the students in wonderful little round tables and chairs to do their work. Otherwise, they were in a classroom that was shaped like this, where they couldn't move the chairs. So how do you do small group work? And so she did it basically as a pilot project. And from that, then she said, okay, this isn't going to work, or this is going to work. And she honed her questions. And in the end, she changed them for the thesis. So I think what you can do is you can start off with a question that's not very well formed and get some information and then say, what about this can I do? And that's why these things are very important, because they can give you ideas about the kind of research that other people have done and their questions, their methodology, and what is a possibility. So one question is, how do you... Well, one of the things I think is very, very difficult for people outside of the U.S. and Canada, Britain, to get published in international journals. And you guys have 2 strikes against you. One of them is that most of you are Arabic native speakers. And as much as you would love to think your English is really, really good, it's not native-like. There's something about that. So you might turn in a paper, and if it's not grammatically perfectly correct, they go, non-native speaker, and that's unfair. I think that's unfair. You might do very, very good work, and because you have a missing article, somebody rejects it, nah. But that's a difficulty. So I think that what you need to do is you need to, first of all, give it a try. And that's again why these research articles are important, because even if it is a classroom-based action research, you can write it up as a research article, just like they do in the big journals, okay? It might be small scale, that may be a limitation that you have, but you can write it up like that. And there are a number of smaller journals in the world that do that. There are conference proceedings, conference proceedings. Very often these are not as high a standard as journal articles. So to get something in a conference proceeding, someone will push you to make it better and better. So that's one place to start off with. I know that TESOL has conference proceedings. TESOL Arabia has conference proceedings. I'm off to Turkey and next week to one of their kind of local conferences, and they also have conference proceedings. So that's one place where there are lots and lots of people who are not native speakers who are turning in articles. So they're likely to turn them down. So conference proceedings is another place to do it. The AUC TESOL Journal, I'm the editor, but I'm very soon not going to be the editor, and I don't know who will be. It's an online journal from AUC that's peer reviewed. Yes, she's one of the committee members. Dina Barai is also one of our committee members. That's another place. And we do not reject people because the grammar's not perfect. If it's not well organized and the grammar is so bad we don't know what they're talking about, we will reject it, but other than that, we'll accept that. And then there was another question about turning it into a MA thesis. Yes, to expand it. And another thing I think is not so much how big something is for an MA thesis, but how well planned it is and how well balanced it is. So we were talking about audio feedback, written feedback. Well, you take 2 classes and you have 2 groups of it, and then you switch and do another one for another class. Something like that, so that it's a well-designed thing that may be collecting more facts. You asked me about, did the audio feedback help them with their written work? Well, that's a really good question. I don't know. It helps them, they said it helped them write, but I don't know if it actually gave me better work. Okay. So we can do that. That's what you need to do, design something that can give you some good answers. Answer your question? Yeah.
No, I have a question. I have answers to your question. I just wanted to make I just want to thank you very much. Thank you very much for the very interesting.
Now, what I would like to, this is your challenge. This is your challenge. You got a problem in your classroom? Let's start trying to solve it. Collect some information. Collect some information. Keep a journal. Do some observations. Do a questionnaire. Anything to start collecting information that you have. If you bring it back the next time, then you can start analyzing it.
Sure. Yes. Thank you very much.